Good afternoon. If you have not chatted us in the chat box, let us know how you're doing this evening. Welcome everyone. We have a ton of people on tonight's webinar. So excited to see everybody joining right now. Veronica, I saw your note in the chat. Can you see us? Can you see the presentation? Okay. All right. Hey everyone. Okay, Veronica says yes. Perfect. Good to know it. Awesome. Hey, Rodney. Hey, Alfredo. Good to see you guys. Hi, Christina. Welcome, everyone. Wow, like I said, this is a popular topic. Y'all keep ready to learn about money management and budgeting tonight. I love it. For those of you that I have not already had the pleasure of meeting, it's so great to virtually meet everybody here tonight. My name is Blaine Cowart. I lead the Homeownership Center here at Dallas Area Habitat. And we are so excited to bring our phenomenal partners at East West Bank up with us here tonight. I'm going to do an introduction of our partners in just a moment, our subject matter expert who has joined us here tonight. But in the meantime, I want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight on tonight's webinar. Tonight, our topic is budgeting. You either love it or you hate it, is a lot of times what we find when it comes to this subject. But either way, we're here to be able to equip you with the skills that you need to be able to really empower yourself to manage your money well and successfully. And we know that, especially when it comes to our dreams, like owning a home, making homeownership a reality, it starts with understanding our cash flow and being able to manage our income no matter what our income is like. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. Before we get started, I have a poll that I want to run for you. So if you're on your phone, if you're on your computer, you should see here in a moment a poll pop up for you to answer some questions. This is an anonymous poll, so no one's going to know your answer. Be honest and truthful, but we want to know from you. 2 questions. Number 1, do you have a budget? Yes or no? By budget, I mean some kind of formal process. It can be written down. You could do it in an app. Checking your bank statement on a daily basis does not count as budgeting. Okay, so do you have a budget? Yes or no? And then the second question is, how often do you budget? So are you actually reviewing your expenses versus what you expected to spend in that category on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, so every 2 weeks, monthly, every once in a while, like when you think about it or you need to, or never? Again, this is an anonymous poll. No one's going to know. I see answers flowing in on this topic. So we want to hear from you. We still have not heard from a couple of people on here. Okay, here we go. 100% answered. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to share the results of this poll so you guys can see what we're looking at here. So do you have a budget? 90% of people on tonight's call said, yes, I do have a budget. So phenomenal. And for those that don't, that's okay. You got to start somewhere, right? We're going to talk tonight about how you can get started. And then how often do you budget? So it looks like the majority of people right now are budgeting on a weekly basis. And I will tell you, especially now, not just during COVID, but especially with the inflation that we are dealing with and these incredible rising prices, weekly budgeting is actually a really smart way to make sure that we're managing our cash flow appropriately. So I think that's a phenomenal way to do it. I also see a good amount of people are budgeting on a monthly basis as well, which makes sense, right? A lot of our bills may only be monthly bills. So that's awesome. Thanks so much. 100%, I'm impressed of poll participation. So thank you guys for taking the time to answer that. Without further ado, I'd love to be able to introduce our subject matter expert tonight. Our friends over at East West Bank, who are some phenomenal partners that we work with, are joining us here tonight to talk about this subject. Specifically, we have our friend Alex Islas, who's here with us tonight. And Alex is on the mortgage loan side of things, but he's going to join us tonight to talk a little bit about, again, sort of financial management basics. Welcome, Alex. We're so excited to have you tonight.
Thanks for having me. Hope to provide some good information that you guys can take back and implement.
Love it. All right. Well, Alex, I will turn it over to you.
Well, guys, so I appreciate you guys getting on, and this is kind of where everything really starts, right? It's kind of knowing we kind of know, right? We know we should be, how much we should spend and how much we should budget and how we divide our beans, right? I always like to use that word, right? 4 beans for this, 3 beans for that. So we kind of know this, right? But it's easier said than done, right? So budgeting is really kind of a discipline, right? So instead of using the word budget, I always like to say discipline, because when you attach something dramatic to a specific task, our mind is weird, so it's going to attach it, right? So when you think of getting off your budget, you're getting off your discipline. You know what I mean? So it's something that I found useful over the years. Is it'll just make it a little bit, it'll kind of wake you up a little bit more, right? So, but anyway, what we're going to talk about today is what is a budget and why do we need one? And again, these are things that we all know, right? If you ask your 2-year-old kid, well, not 2-year-old, but maybe like a 12-year-old, you ask them what a budget is, they're going to have a general idea of what it is, right? So we're going to cover what is a budget and why we need one and why it's so important. And here's some of the things that we're going to learn. Why is a budget, what would be the word? Necessary, important, right? And number 2, and I wish it was a little bit more interactive, because I could kind of get you guys, I could picture you guys saying, different words and things like that. So number 2 is going to be.
Well, why don't you tell us in the chat, guys? Help us fill in the blank. Tell us in the chat box what you think should go in the blank.
Yes, great idea. So number 2, a budget is what? Managing a budget. That's a good one.
Okay.
What would be
Billy
what?
Says he thinks that we're going to learn what a budget is and how I create one.
I feel like Vanna White. So what is a budget? I think that's probably, let's see what number 2 is. How do I create a budget?
Uh-oh, we don't have number 2. Number 2 didn't populate.
Well, number 2 is going to be, we're going to say that that's going to be up to the individual, right? But it's what? What is a budget? So those are the things we're going to talk about today. Now, why is it important? Why is the budget important? Because it helps where you are. And let me open that one up. I can't open it. Because it helps you, it helps where you are and what you can save. Well, I mean, guys, let's talk about, remember we said we're going to use the word discipline, right? So why is discipline important? Right? It's going to keep you, I saw track, so it's going to keep you on track. It gives you a roadmap, right, of where you're trying to get. So that's one of the, and now is it going to populate stuff, Blaine? Is it going to populate an answer?
It is, yeah, we'll go through that. Let's see.
So number 1, it helps us develop a better financial habits. Number 2, it relieves emotional stress. Number 3, assists you in achieving your financial goals. Now, again, I think the big one there is number 2, right? Is having our finances kind of scattered all over the place creates a lot of emotional stress, right? Now, when you have emotional stress, everything else kind of falls apart, right? The way you perform at work, the way you make certain decisions, right? So it throws you off your game, right? The other 2 are extremely important, right? Because of your habits, right? So the discipline leads to the habits, right? But you can't develop habits if you're under stress, because it throws you off your game, right? And then obviously your financial goals. And again, it's really a map of where you're trying to get. So when you're setting your budget, you're sitting down and thinking about where is it that I'm trying to get to, right? Is it buying a home? Is it saving for my kids, college? Is it, saving for a vehicle, whatever it is? That's the destination, right? But the budget is going to be the map that helps you get there. And the way you're going to be able to get there is by the habits that you develop, less stress, which helps you have healthy relationships, and ultimately getting you to that roadmap, to that end goal, right? The destination. That's why it's important. Now, why is it necessary? Right? A budget, obviously, it's necessary because in order for you to know where you're going, you got to know how you're going to get there, right? And it's going to identify and it defines the steps you need to get, the steps you need to take in order for you to get there, right? It's also going to help you manage your money. Right now, a lot of these things are kind of, it's kind of like the usual things you're going to hear, right? It directs your money flow. It's going to help you increase your savings, avoid spending money unnecessarily, and it achieves your personal goals. Now, these are all things we need to, we all kind of want to get towards, right? But if you guys can kind of, what would be some goals that you guys, through budgeting, what would be some of your goals, right? So for you guys, if you guys can put on the chat box, right? You're taking this budgeting class, but what's the reason you're taking it, right? What's the end game? What's the goal, right? Is it a home? Is it college savings? What is it? A home? 2 for home, 3 for home, 5 for home. So I see homes there. Now, why do you guys think it's important to develop and have those habits and have that discipline? Because one thing is getting to be able to qualify for a home, right? Once you get it, moving forward, it's a different ballgame, right? Texas State Fair, I saw that one. I've never been to it, but it sounds fun. Now, once you guys get the home, right, you guys are going to have that discipline that you guys have developed to get there, right? So now when you own a home, you got to have taxes, you have insurance, you have, unexpected expenses. And having those habits and learning how to save your beans for different rainy days and things like that, that's where you guys are really going to feel the fact that if you guys got used to developing and got used to that discipline, once you get that house, it's going to be easy, right? Because sometimes, getting into the home and not having set that discipline from the get-go, then now you get it, then you're like, okay, now what? Right? Now the plumbing broke. Now I have an unexpected tax bill. Now I have, whatever may come up. If you never develop those habits, right, now that you have the home, it's going to intensify, so that emotional stress is going to be times 10, because now you have a $300,000 or $400,000 debt. So that's why all of these are, yes, we know we need all of these things, right? But we got to understand what the goal is. Now let's see what a budget is. So the definition of a budget is a plan for coordination of resources and expenditures. Now that's a simply put, a budget is a plan for managing your money in a way that best meets your personal needs and wants. Now, the key word is best meets your personal, right? Because everything is going to be different. Everybody on this call is going to have different, obviously everybody's looking for a home, right? But different priorities. Some people are going to want to save this way, right? Some people are going to want to do it this way. There's no perfect way to develop a budget. There's no perfect way to develop the habits, right? You just have to find what works for you, right? And at the end of the day, if it gets you to your goal, it doesn't matter that you're doing it completely opposite to what somebody else is doing. It's just got to work for you. So you guys got to remember that it's got to be tailor-made to fit you and put you in a situation to succeed. Now, here's some keys to some effective budget developing. Number one, we've talked about this, right? What's the end game? What's the X at the end of the map, right? Where are we trying to get to? So we got to identify that. Why are we doing this, right? What's the end game? So number two, evaluate and record current trends, both income and expenses. So that means identify, understand, know yourself, and don't be in denial about what you're spending on and what you're saving on, right? Is really be truthful, right? Evaluate. You know what? Every time the state fair comes, I spend $1,000. I understand that's how it is. So guess what? I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is budget for it throughout the year. That way it's not a big time expense at the time that the fair comes. You see what I'm saying? So what happens is a lot of folks mistake, oh, well, if I'm on a budget, that means I got to cut everything out. Can't have fun. Can't do this, can't do that. We're not saying that. What we're saying is budget, develop a discipline, right? If you put one bean every month, when that fair comes in, you've already budgeted for that, right? Let's see what number 3 is. Assign priorities, right? Now, these priorities are going to be individual to, they're going to be specific to you guys, right? They're going to be specific to you guys. Again, some of you guys are going to want to spend for this. Some of you guys are going to spend for that, whatever it is, right? Understand why are you prioritizing this over that? And then work towards that. Now, develop a timeline. Now, I think this is one of the key ones is when we go to the gym, well, and I'm telling you from experience, I'm like, you know what? This is the month. Today, I'm starting, right? And then guess what? I go for a whole month. I go every single day. Every single day. Boom, boom, boom. Every single day, I'm on it. But that's not sustainable, at least for me. So I'll go every single month, and then I'll drop off and then don't go for 6. You see what I'm saying? So what happens is that when you develop a timeline, develop something that's sustainable and realistic to you, right? Now, if you want to go for broke, go for it, right? But you can always adjust and develop some, tighter and tighter and higher goals as you develop those habits. But first, how about instead of going every single day for a month, how about we go once a week for 6 months? You see what I'm saying? So develop realistic timelines that you can sustain over a long period of time. That way, you are putting yourself in a situation to succeed. And keep it simple, right? And that's why if we go back to the previous slides, all of those, assign this, evaluate that, those are all good, right? Those are the things that, when our eyes read them, they just go down they go down smooth, right? Because those are the things we identify and do this, right? But guess what? Let's just keep it simple. And what I mean by keep it simple is if know yourself, prioritize. And what I mean by that is understand what, kind of put yourself in a situation to succeed. I hope it kind of makes sense. I'm trying to keep it so simple that I'm making it difficult to explain. But it's don't overcomplicate it, right? If you make $10, right, and you want to spend 10 of those $10, that's probably not what we want you to do. But if those other $5, you're going to be able to put them away over an extended period of time, as long as it gets you to your goal. It doesn't have to get you to your goal tomorrow. It doesn't have to get you to your goal in the next year. But as long as it gets you to your goal within a reasonable time, that's what matters. It's kind of like the rabbit and the turtle, the hare and the turtle, right? It doesn't matter as long as you get there. It doesn't matter that it's taking you a little bit longer to get there, right? As long as you get there. Number 6, remain flexible. One size does not fit all. And that's kind of like the theme of today. And that's the theme it's taking, is that as you go through your initial budget that you set, as time goes on, you may find that you have to adjust it. You may have to tighten it up. You may have to loosen it up. You may have to extend your time period from a year to 2 years, but it's okay. Just stay on that. It's kind of like what we tell, I tell folks when they're going through difficult times, right? Find a way to keep your store open, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Just stay in the game. Stay. Keep that open sign outside, right? That's all you should kind of be thinking about. It's okay if it takes you 5 years. It's all right. Number 7, review and revise. So once you set these goals, periodically, monthly, weekly, annually, biannually, whatever your time period is, review it and then adjust it. Now, budgeting is effective money management. Effective money management is planning how to get the most from your money. Number 2, good money managers keep track of where their money goes so that they can make it go farther. Effective money management includes, here's some examples: developing personal financial goals, organizing personal financial goals, creating a personal monthly budget, evaluating personal financial health. Now, these are, it kind of goes back to what we've kind of already covered, right? Is understand where every single dollar goes, where you're spending it, how many, streaming accounts you have, evaluating if you really need Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. You really got to sit down and understand what your expenses are and understand where all your money's going towards. Developing financial goals, again, it's the X on the map, right? Organizing your personal financial records is, whether it's online or you do it old school, understand where you're storing all of your money, your 401k, your savings account, whatever, your IRA. Understand where they're at, keep them updated, keep your records organized. Your personal monthly budget, again, how much are you willing to spend on rent? Or not that sometimes we have a choice, right? But how much are you spending on your home, on your cars, entertainment, savings, kids, how much you're spending on Amazon? Understand where all that money is going towards, and then start making adjustments on that. And that's what evaluating your personal financial health is. Now, one of the things we're missing about this part is that our employment, right? What are we doing to also further our income potential, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can augment that. We can add to it with so that's something that I think we haven't covered. Now, here's some ways that we can create a budget. So creating a budget begins with a clear, accurate, well thought out plan. This allows us to adjust the plan, adjust activities, and any spending that is needed. Spend money most effectively. Now, what does that mean? Is we got to spend money where we're getting the best rate of return, right? And what I mean by that is there's certain expenses. Drop your budgeting questions here. Okay. And so evaluate where we're spending our money at, right? Number 3 is reach the specific goals you have set. And 4, strengthen internal control systems. Now, what would be an example of how we can strengthen, what's an internal control? What would be an example of an internal control that we can have? Let's see what you guys say on the chat box. Any ideas of what would be? Think about the tools that exist out there that we can use as control, right? There's an app for everything. So everything doesn't have to be, us and just you on your own, or through counseling, right? There's other methods we can have. There's a lot of different spending tools. You know, there's a lot of different apps you guys can use. Your bank, your credit cards, they have nowadays. You can run a report and it shows you where you're spending most of your money. So just utilize the tools that we have, that you guys have, to be able to keep yourself on track. You can never beat, in my opinion, you can never beat old school. I saw the note there and it said pen and paper. Apps on your phone. Pen and paper, apps on your phone. What other ways can we keep track of that? Each other, right? Spouse, your phone, calculators. But most of it, I think the strongest one is things you can see. If you can see it. I'm a big believer, if you see it, you can't. Mint is good, right? Have any of you guys been able to, I think some of the accounts that you guys may have, you guys can actually run the reports and it'll tell you where your money's being spent. I'm a big believer of seeing it. If you can see it with your eyes, then you can't run from it. Because sometimes if you don't see it, you spent it, but if you don't see it coming out of your account, it's like it never existed. I'm a big believer in seeing it. One thing you guys should all try, download your accounts, your bank statements, and go through every single one of them. And it's kind of mind-blowing sometimes what you can see. You're like, wow. Now, what is the budget? Simply put, it's your income, any money you've earned and contributed to your household from other personal finances or a business, and then in comparison to your expenses. Money that you spend, this includes anything you purchase. This includes both planned and unexpected expenses. Now, I'm telling you guys, one exercise you guys should really do is look at your bank statements. Because I don't know if you guys can just on the chat box put, but when's the last time that you've honestly looked at your bank account besides just looking at the balances, right? Because most of us have the apps. You look at the balance. If it more or less makes sense, all right, Elena, good. But most of us, if you look at it and if the balances make sense, you may leave it alone. But print out your bank statements and look at every single line item, right? Look at, tacos, Taco Bell, wherever you guys are eating. Then you'll see your deposit coming in, right? And then you see, okay, it took me 5 days to just, kill it off, right? And then you see your bank statement coming in, and then you see it coming in again, right? I think it's really telling. It's really right in front of you. You can see it. Now, this goes both ways, right? You could either be like, damn, I'm doing an excellent job. I see that X amount came in on Monday. On Thursday, I put this amount in my savings account. It's also reinforcement of good behavior. So it's not just to show you that, you're spending, it's also showing you where your money's going towards. It's also reinforcing your good habits, right? And you guys should, one thing is that, is if you have kids, you should see that with your kids. You should go over the bank statements with your kids so they can kind of see, they can kind of see that minus in front of in front of that spend, whatever it is that spend. That way they can see that money comes in, but it also leaves, and it just makes it real, right? Where they can see it. Now, here's some steps in budgeting. Number one, the X on the map, right? That I always like to say that's the X on the map. Where is it that we're trying to get to? That's your goals. Number two is how much are you bringing in, right? Estimate your income. Now, think of ways for number two. think of ways you can increase that, right? Because that can dramatically speed up how soon you get to that X. Now record what you spend. Now you can have your pen and paper, or you can use your bank account. I love looking at this bank statements though, because you can detail make notes on that. Now budget for actual and unexpected expenses, right? So we use the fair example, right? There's vacations, there's, nowadays youth sports are expensive, whatever it is. Don't let it just be, don't let that expense, it's coming. So budget for it, right? And even budget for rent for rainy days, unexpected expenses. And ensure that you review these and evaluate them monthly. And again, you take out all your paperwork, you're sitting in your kitchen table, you're looking at that bank statement, you're looking through that app, you're looking through Mint, you're looking through whatever method you use, and you sit there and you do that with interested parties, right? Whether it's your spouse, whether it's your partner, whoever it is, you sit there and you both, or you as a family or whoever it is, you sit there and you kind of put it on the table. That's how you can hold each other accountable or hold other people accountable. Because you can't run. 1 + 1 is always going to equal 2, or 1 - 1 is always going to equal 0, right? So just, I'm a big believer. See it, touch it. So now here's some ways to set that X, right? Again, what's the end game? And is it going to be long-term or short-term? Long-term typically is going to be more than 12 months, 1 to 5 years. Short-term, anything less than a year. We talked about making them achievable. Put yourself in a situation to succeed. So achievable, practical, and owned by everyone. And again, that goes towards sitting in the kitchen table and holding others accountable, right? Or ourselves. Keep them in the forefront, journal the process, and celebrate the completion. And again, you have to not only beat yourself up, but also give yourself a high five, right? If you're noticing that you're ahead of schedule, that doesn't mean go celebrate, right? And spend money. That means you acknowledge it, you give yourself a high five. Now it may be time to make an adjustment, right? So that was easy. So now how about we tighten it a little bit, right? To get you to that X a little sooner. Write them into your monthly budget. Again, a budget without a plan or an end game, I think that's where folks sometimes make that mistake. You got to know why you're doing things. There's got to be a reason behind everything. And then again, adjust them as necessary. Adjust them up, adjust them down. You're going to have to add some expenses, take some expenses, add some income potentially, but you have to be flexible and fluid. Now, this is kind of something I've been mentioning a couple of times about your income, right? We've talked about expenses. We talked about don't spend on this, try to save towards that, right? But what about the money that's coming in, right? So make a list of each stream of income that you receive on a regular basis each month. The key is to only include income that you get every month, right? So include income that is sustainable and you can kind of depend on. A bonus or something, that came out of the blue, obviously you're not going to include that because that was a one-off, right? So include only income that you can depend on, that you're going to get month over month. Include both monthly wages earned from your jobs, if you have multiple jobs or it's more than one person, as well as monthly supplemental income like child support or disability. So again, include income that month over month you're going to receive. Mark down the dates that these are received. If you're not depositing everything, then yeah, you got to mark them on some type of app, ledger, whatever it is. But again, that's why I'm a big fan of your bank statements, because typically everything goes in there. Once you've added all of those, then calculate your monthly income. right? Because you'll know how to divide that income up. Record, but do not include any periodic income you may receive at this point. If your income is unpredictable, estimate what you will receive in the next month and adjust it down a little bit. That means flexible income, right? If you have boom and bust type of income, right, comes in waves, then always go on the conservative side. That way you can adjust your budget to a worst case scenario situation. That way it's going to put you in a more in a better position to succeed, right? That way you're not setting yourself for constant failing. Record what you spend. Review the previous month's checkbook, ledger, bank statements, etc., and record your spending and income. Number 2, record what you spend for the next month and write down what your actual expenses and income. Now, again, we have a lot of tools. We just got to use them, right? Whatever those tools are and whatever works for you, just use them and stick to them, because we use them, then we just kind of don't use them anymore, and then we kind of lose track. So it's that discipline we got to develop to use the tools that we have. Now, budget for actual and unexpected expenses. So what are some expected actual expenses, right? Identify fixed expenses like rent, auto payment, student loans. Record the monthly payment deadline and plan accordingly to your pay date. I think this is kind of key, right? Understanding when your bills are due versus when you're getting paid, and then ensure that you're kind of keeping up with that cycle. Because even I sometimes am guilty of this, right? I know when a bill is being paid, but I figure, nah, you know what? I'll just pay next pay period. But we don't understand that now we're behind, right? Now we're kind of behind on that, because now it's going to put instead of being able to save more money because I put that bill off, now it's throwing me off. So just sticking to that discipline of knowing when the bill is due in correlation to your pay date, and ensuring that you eliminate your bills as they come. Now, what are some variable expenses? Identify recurring expenses that fluctuate. Monthly grocery, automobile, gas, and especially now, gas and inflation and grocery bills are just insane. A little bit, just today, my wife, calls me up and she says, "Can you believe you don't know how much I spent?" I'm like, okay. She asked me to guess. She bought 4 protein shakes and I think like some facial wrinkle cream or something, right? She asked me how much I thought she spent. I said $40. She's like, "No, I spent $70." It's just insane, right? So that is an example of a variable expense, right? And when in doubt, when you're estimating these, just guess high. Here's some examples of some actual expenses. Rent or mortgage, shelter, roof over our heads, transportation, car, the upkeep of the vehicle, gas, insurance, health, medical, life, auto. We always need insurance. We sometimes don't really enjoy paying the insurance, but you're glad you have it when you need it. So that's always a must. Food, household utilities, clothing, and entertainment. Now, in each of these, what do you guys think are the places where you guys can kind of make the biggest adjustment? And when you guys are budgeting and you're thinking of cutting down expenses, right? Where would you target first? If you guys, are sitting there in the kitchen table and you're like, you know what, we're going to reduce our expenses. All right. Entertainment and clothing, right? Restaurants, entertainment, that would be entertainment, right? clothing. Now look, guys, here's kind of what, if I remember, and look, and the reason it's a little off is this is the first time I do this specific presentation, all right? So I'm getting used to it as well. But at the beginning, we talked about, and I keep going back to the fair as an example. We're not saying, stay home, right? Or eliminate clothing or eliminate entertainment. It's just your approach is going to be just a little bit different, right? It's not going to be so, you know what, let's go eat, right? It's not going to be so sudden, right? Everything's going to be planned. Everything's going to be more methodical. Everything's going to be more kind of disciplined, right? Is if you want to have a big fancy dinner, then you just plan for it. And I know that it's kind of annoying, right? Thinking about it. You know what? I'm going to go to dinner next month, right? And you know that dinner may cost you $500. I'm just throwing that number out there. I'm not saying that, right? So then guess what? For the next, if you get paid weekly, for the next, month, you can save $100, right? And guess what? That'll be part of your budget. That'll be a variable expense. You go out to dinner, boom, you get that off your list. Then you can do that another 6 months from now. Same thing with clothing, right? You want that specific sneakers, you want that. I mean, we're not saying don't do it, right? What we're saying is implement that discipline into everything, that how you're going to do it, because it's what's going to happen is you're still going to be able to have that fancy dinner. It's just not going to be so all of it out of nowhere. You can still buy those shoes, right? It's just not going to affect you in the way where it throws off your savings. It throws you off from getting to that X on the map, right? Now, here's some other stuff that we got to budget, right? Student loan payments, insurance payments. Now, you know what? With the insurance payments, one of the things is you guys really need to evaluate your coverages that you have on your autos, even like cell phone coverage. I mean, meaning cell phone insurance, because a lot of you guys, we have iPhones, so we get additional coverages on our iPhones, but the first year is covered by Apple. So there's a lot of different things that sometimes we don't even realize that we're paying for over coverage. So insurance is sometimes kind of like a hidden, it's just taking away our not a lot, right? But there's a way for us to make that a little bit more better return on our investment. Entertainment, movies, books, magazines. I'm gonna say just look at the streaming services, because those are insane. Sometimes you look back and you have every single streaming service. There's no way we can watch them all at the same time. Your income taxes, childcare, medical bills, savings, and vacations. Now, budget for actual and unexpected expenses. One of the biggest things, we got to create that emergency fund, right? And we want to make sure that a budget is kind of, somebody once explained to me that a budget is kind of like carrying, it's, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're really thirsty, and you go downstairs and the lights are off, and you go barefooted, you put the water, you fill up your cup with water, and you fill it to the rim, all the way to the top, right? Now, it's dark, you got a cup full of water, right? And you're trying to walk upstairs with your cup full of water. Any little thing, cat jumping out, stepping on a toy, you bump into a sofa, guess what's gonna happen? The water's gonna spill, right? That's kind of like the same thing with making sure you have an emergency fund, right? It's just making sure that you have the ability to you're just not putting that cup all the way up. That's what an emergency fund is, right? It's going to help you be ready in case something happens. So initially, the emergency fund should be between 500 to 1,000, depending on your income and debt load. Eventually, you need to increase this to 3 to 6 months worth of your income. Develop the attitude that this is only used for emergencies in case of unemployment, unexpected medical needs, or any other financial crisis. Number 5, you should have to use money in this fund for an emergency. The priority for the next month is to resupply the fund. Now, here's some budgeting terms, right? Surplus. If you have, once you build up your savings, your emergency fund, you're going to have a surplus, right? Once you've used that surplus, and now you're going to have a deficit. So a deficit occurs if you have negative cash flow. Discretionary income is money you have left over after paying your essentials. So on a monthly basis, your discretionary income is any money that's left over after you've paid all of your expenses, or your essentials, I should say. Now, your discretionary income is used to evaluate the strength of your personal income. So that's what represents the money you could spend on your wants. So that's the money you can kind of play with. That's your play money. So review and evaluate. Review your monthly review on a monthly basis, especially when you begin the process. Number 2, evaluate the budget against your personal financial goals. All monthly deficits need to be addressed immediately. All surplus experience needs to be added to savings. Consider operating on a cash envelope system. And the most important one, do not get discouraged. You just got to stay open, right? Keep that open sign outside. Just keep it open. Here's some practical tips. Your budget must be balanced. The income must equal the expenses. If you make, you must have a destination for that money. That does not mean you must spend it. Planning to put money in some type of savings account is a great idea. The income must equal expenses. So again, if you have discretionary income, just because we call it your play money doesn't mean you got to spend it, right? You could save it, and guess what? That's just going to speed up that you get quicker to that X on your map. You know what? That's a good question as far as the cash envelope system. I'm very upfront. This is the first time I've done this, but we'll discuss it in the Q&A. Plan carefully. Estimates should be based on some data and cover all your expenses. Be practical, be flexible. Write your budget down. Be able to access your budget data easily. Again, carry it with you. You should have your folder on your phone, just carry it with you, make it accessible, make it available to you. Now you guys can ask some questions.
Alex, thank you so much for running through kind of the technical nature of budgeting and how we should effectively do that. And Alex, if you want to, you're welcome to turn your camera on. Up to you. We're no longer going to screen share.
Okay, here I am.
Okay, to our attendees, Mia, we saw your question in the chat. I'm happy to answer that question. The envelope system. Before we dig into that, I just want to give you guys a quick shout out. Tell us your budgeting questions. Ask us your budgeting questions. We're here to answer those tonight, Alex and myself. So if you have doubts or concerns or questions about an approach, or if you struggle, maybe budgeting is really hard for you, let us know, what questions you have about this. So Mia asked earlier, what is the cash envelope system? And if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, send us a note in the chat. A lot of times people know Dave Ramsey as sort of the financial guru. If you will, a lot of church programs, we know, use his financial peace program. Dave Ramsey is a huge proponent of the cash envelope system. And here's how this system works. In the cash envelope system, you literally budget with envelopes of cash, and each envelope contains your line item in your budget. So for instance, if on a monthly basis, you're budgeting $300 a month for gas, you would take out $300 in cash and it goes into your gas envelope. And for the month of March, when you hit that 300 bucks, guess what? You are done utilizing your line item for gas that month. So it really forces you to have this like very tangible nature with your budget. Something about you literally having dollar bills in an envelope and being able to see like, oh my gosh, okay, I said that my eating out budget this month is gonna be $200. And now I can see like there's only 10 bucks left in this envelope. That something about that is a lot more hands-on when it comes to budgeting than just the swipe that we do with our credit card and our debit card, right? Or the Apple Pay, or whatever it is that we're doing these days. That makes it a lot more difficult and really can lead to some of this overspending that we see. Like Alex mentioned earlier, unless you're reviewing your bank statements, and this is a lot different than just checking your balance, right? Unless you're reviewing your bank statement, to your point, Alex, like going through these line items to see, okay, when I ate out in the last month, how much was I spending? How much did I expect to spend? And then how much did I actually spend? And sometimes I think we underestimate this, right? Or we're like, I didn't eat out that many times. And then we go back to our bank statement. And this is particularly important if we're budgeting from a household perspective, right? Because you might think you're in great shape. And maybe you're married, or maybe you have a significant other. And maybe, you know, going through the expenses might, you know, open our eyes, like maybe we're not using the same approach on this and we've got to shore things up a bit. Kids can factor into that as well. If you have children, right? Who are spending money as well. Esperanza says, I learned from one of the Dallas Habitat modules about the 50-30-20 plan, and I love it. Yes, Esperanza, we can talk about that as well. That's a great approach for budgeting that we are big proponents of here at Habitat. 50-30-20 plan basically means, and you can kind of slice and dice it. You can do it a couple of different ways. But in this plan, the 50% chunk of your budget always represents 50% of your budget goes to needs. So step one of this approach is defining your needs versus your wants. Okay, and Alex talked a little bit about this earlier, but really determining, you know, some of the things are basic, right? Housing is a need, food is a need, transportation is a need, right? But then you get into some like areas that are a little bit more gray, right? Where you might say like clothing, okay, it's a want. But is it, right? Like, do you need certain clothing perhaps to go to work for your job? Then maybe it's kind of a need, kind of a want, right? Entertainment. People might easily say like, that's a want. But also, you know, based on the lifestyle that you want to live, maybe you have kids and you want them to get out and see the world and do things. So maybe it's kind of, you know, in some regards, it can be considered maybe part of that more of a need. So really carefully go through your budget and determine everything that you spend money on, all your categories of expenses, what are needs and what are wants. 50% of your budget is allocated for those needs that you have. Then 30% of your budget is allocated towards preferably savings. This is where you can float. So 30% towards savings and 20% towards your wants. You can also do it like 50% of your budget goes to needs, 30% goes to wants, 20% go to savings. We would ask, what are your goals? If you have an aggressive savings goal, Alex asked this question earlier, what are you guys saving for? 90% of people on today's call said a home. That's a big financial goal, right? We're going to have to save some of the most money that we're ever going to save for a financial transaction when we purchase a house and enter home ownership. So we would say, if that's your goal, if that's your short-term goal, then maybe if you're using the 50-30-20, your 30% is allocated for saving and then only 20% for wants. And I would just remind the audience as well, like budgeting can and should be a fluid process. What your budget is today, if you're looking to buy a house in the next year, is not your forever budget, right? So don't be afraid to like really take red ink to that budget and say like, do I really need this? And maybe it's a nice to have like after I get into my house, but if my goal is to get in a house in the next 12 months, how am I going to do that? How am I going to maximize my budget to get the amount saved that I need to for upfront costs to be able to do this in the deadline that I set for myself?
And one thing I want to add, Blaine, is that we have to understand, as consumers, we have to understand, and I work for a bank, right? We have to understand how things are set up, right? You have DoorDash, you have everything is ease of use, ease of use, right? But that is what really throws people off, because if you really think about how many times folks eat out, or how many times you use DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever it is, it's not because it's so easy to use. You're not understanding how much you're spending, right? And that whole thing of looking at your app and just, most of us, I was glad to see on the chat box that it said you guys are actually looking at your line items on your bank statement. But I'd venture to say that 90% of the folks out there look at the balance, they open up their app, and if the balance is more or less in line with what they think, they let it go. They're fine. But they're not, that's where they're missing the vital parts of budgeting. So again, cash, looking at things a little bit kind of old school, don't be afraid to do that, because if it's there, you can't run from it. So
I think that's a great point. Yeah, Alex, I think that's a great point and very well taken, right? I think that's what makes budgeting an active, participative process. Sometimes when we think about budgeting, we talk about this in counseling a lot. If you're in our counseling program at Habitat, what's the first thing that we do with you in the program on day one? A budget, right? And that's why there's a reason that we start with that. And it's because you really can't devise your financial goals, like Alex talked about today, unless you understand, like, what is my cash flow like? What is my current situation, my status quo? What do I need to change, if anything, to achieve my goals? And we talk about this a lot. Creating your budget is just step one. If you create your budget and you never look at it again, you're not budgeting, right? We know that what we should be spending, but if you're not going back, like Alex said, and reviewing, if you're using, a debit card or a credit card, then reviewing your bank statements or your credit card statements is going to allow you to be able to go back and analyze how you spent versus budget. If you're not using that, if you're using cash, that's where some of the systems like the envelope system might come into play for you, because your bank statements won't necessarily do you a lot of good if you're predominantly using cash to buy things. So think about what method really works for you. So many people said that they use banking apps for this, and that's great. There's some phenomenal banking apps out there. Mint was mentioned. And like we talked about, Habitat has a lot of free resources as well. Again, if you're in the counseling program, you can use the budget template in the community. You also can use our budget resources on PocketWise, which if you're not familiar, you can find that on our website as well. So lots of resources out there. Just find one that ultimately is going to work for you. Any other questions from our audience, from our participants tonight before we wrap? If you do, drop it in the chat and we'll get to it. And while we're waiting to see if anyone else has questions, I do want to just remind everyone that's on tonight's call, and Barbara, I see your question, we'll get to that as well. I want to remind everybody on tonight's call that we do have several other classes actually this month that are coming up. We have a lot of classes in the month of March. So if you haven't registered for our next classes, go on our website to look at the education calendar and get signed up for those. We've got a homebuyer education class coming up on the 19th of this month. We have a savings class later in the month, and then an intro to homeownership class as well. So lots of really good content. We'd love to see you guys back in all those classes. Barbara asked, is using auto draft for bill payments a good idea when trying to budget? I love this question. Alex, do you have an opinion on that?
Auto draft, I think it's great, depending on the bill, on the type of bill, right? I think it goes back to, is it a necessity? Is it a bill that's tied to a necessity? I think it's great. If it's a necessity, you'll make sure that you can get it out, and then you can time that with your paydays, right? So you can there's an art to it, right? So if you get paid on the 15th, you can eliminate X, Y, and C bill. And then that'll allow you to then be able to budget. But if it's a want, then I'm not a fan of those, because those are the ones you're not going to pay attention to. Amazon's always going to hit. Hulu's always going to hit. Disney Plus is always going to hit. And all of a sudden, that's costing you 50, 100, whatever it is. So I would say great idea for the needs. Not such a great idea for the wants.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I was just having this conversation yesterday with someone about, now I'm seeing all these advertisements for these apps that help you clean up all the things that you're subscribed to. They don't realize that you're subscribed to, right? And so that's kind of the danger, I think, to your point, Alex, about, if we're not careful about really keeping close tabs on what we're paying, and if everything's just auto withdrawn, it's almost out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
So it is really great for some of your really important needs, like your housing payment, car payment, those kinds of things. It ensures that you're never late, right? And that it gets paid by the appropriate date, and you can set it up to hit on a certain day of the month based on when you get paid. But I would agree with that. I think for your ones, maybe think twice. The act of having to go in and make those payments forces you to remember, like, number one, I'm still paying for this. And number two, if there's, price fluctuation or amount fluctuation, like, geez, this is way more expensive than it is before. On a personal note, I think we're all reeling right now from inflation, right? Especially, I noticed, saw a note in the chat about food, and I think like eating out, groceries, so expensive right now with rising prices. That's one of those things that groceries is a need, right? But every week, or however often that you're in there, going in there, I was just sharing with someone this week, over the weekend, going in and buying groceries, and I was doing it on a app, and looking at my cart and thinking, do I really need this? Delete. When you see what your bill's going to be, right? And so sometimes that manual manipulation of your budget can be a benefit.
And look, this is just my own personal opinion. I know that it's 2022, but don't be afraid to do some of the things a little bit old school. I'm telling you, you know what? There's a reason grandma always had money, right? It's because of the way she did things, is she felt it. And on this call, ask yourself, how many times have you said, you know what? I don't like cash because I always spend it. You know what? That right there tells you that you're not as good at budgeting as you think, right? Because the reason you're spending is because you're so used to just flipping it. Dollar here, dollar there, dollar here, right? So that old school thing, it's underrated. I'm telling you, try it.
I agree. I think Julian put in the chat, right? Like pen and paper. Sometimes pen and paper is a great way to just, if you're having to actually write all this out, and even if it's not right with a pen, maybe it's dropping it into an Excel spreadsheet. But if you're having to manually track it somehow, sometimes again, that forces you to say like, geez, I didn't realize I was doing this on that. So, yeah.
Well, and I'll make it quick. Anybody know why, folks? And I'm gonna date myself, but I used to write standards on the, I will not, throw apples at kids, whatever, right? There's a reason that was the reasoning behind that is they believe that if you wrote it enough times, it would sink in your mind, and subconsciously in the future, you wouldn't do that, right? That's the whole reasoning behind standards and writing it on the chalkboard, right? It's the same thing with doing it old school. I'm telling you, you write it out, it's painful when you're writing it out.
Same thing goes with your financial goals though, right? And we've talked a lot about this at Habitat in our other classes. If you really write out your goals, you're more likely, research shows that you're more likely to actually follow through with them. Right. So I think that there is something to be said about this kind of tangible nature about money management and our financial goals for sure. Alex, it has been such a pleasure as always having you tonight for our class. Thank you so much for joining us and making the time.